Hey there, Insane Sam here. This video and the next one are about the famed Coral Court Motel in the St. Louis suburbs. This place was at the same time classy and sleazy. It also was part of one of the most gruesome crimes of the 20th century. You'll find out about that in the next video. The Coral Court Motel was opened in 1942 by John Carr as an upscale motor court in the then largely undeveloped St. Louis suburb of Marlboro. He wanted to take advantage of the large U.S. population movement that began during World War II. It was located on Route 66 at 7755 Watson Road and originally consisted of an office building, 10 separate single-story bungalows, each with 2 rooms separated by a 2-car indoor garage. Construction costs reportedly were $7,000. That sounds cheap even in 1942 dollars. But this place was intended to be the finest motel in the St. Louis area and a natural stopping point for travelers heading west from Chicago on Route 66, which still was the best highway to the west. Its distinctive architecture made it stand out from its competitors. It gained a national reputation and families would make annual trips there. The original 10 buildings were the traditional units. They were made of golden glazed bricks and opaque glass blocks that resulted in a really slick, streamlined Art Deco look. In 1946, 23 additional 2-room buildings were added. These were referred to as the May West units because the front bays were curved and so was May West. In 1953, 3 2-story buildings, each with 8 rooms, were added, and in the early 1960s, a pool was added, which was very popular with the guests, and the local neighborhood children were allowed the run of the place. The Coral Court was a no-tell motel even from the beginning. In 1942, nightly and hourly rates were both available. The privacy of the enclosed parking spaces made the Coral Court popular with both adults and hormone-raging teens seeking low-rent rendezvous. Rumors about the owner, John Carr's past, added to the Coral Court's mystique. There were rumors he'd been a financial guy for the mob and that he owned brothels in downtown St. Louis. He had card games in the basement of the office building, and there was a secret underground passageway to a basement in a house across the street if they needed a quick getaway. So this place was an odd mixture of respectability and seediness. Although it was always known for its clandestine trysts, it also was so nice that it attracted families and even newlyweds. Shelley Graham published a book called Tales from the Coral Court, which has dozens of reminiscences of former employees, motel guests, and other people. Shelley quotes author Michael Wallace as saying, "Just after the motor court opened, young men going off to war stayed there with their wives and sweethearts. Some of those GIs never returned. There are women whose hair's grown gray that recall every detail of that last night spent with their young men, wrapped only in each other's arms with only the sound of passing traffic on the mother road to serenade them. To all those people, and for so many, many more, the Coral Court was a special place, an extra special place." On the other hand, a former housekeeper was asked, "Why do you think people came to the Coral Court?" She said, "Well, you know, to get that groove on. That's all I can tell you. To get that groove on. You know, they had those artificial things. You'd always find those tricky little toys. You'd always find them in the room, all sizes, all shapes. That was one of the funnier things." My Ole Miss fraternity brother Steve King is a lifelong St. Louis resident who recalls the Coral Court well. He told me Coral Courts, otherwise known as the No-Tell Motel, had a well-deserved reputation as a place where one could get discreetly screwed around. The rooms had garages, so your car was safe from prying eyes. The Art Deco was cool, but the rooms were not at all that neat. Bad mattresses, bad plumbing, and you were lucky if more than one light worked. Later in the night, on some weekends, there was literally a traffic jam around the place. Starting at around 10 or 11, there would be a line in the office to get a room. I was there a couple of times, but I'd usually had a few, so I really don't remember many of the details. I-44 bypassed Route 66 in Marlboro in 1972. Unlike many businesses, the Coral Court remained prosperous, at least for a while. But John Carr died in 1984, the same year Route 66 was decommissioned. John's wife, Jessie, didn't want to run the motel herself, and she let it get into disrepair. She claimed she was disinclined to sell the motel unless the buyer would agree to restore it to its original grandeur, but there were no takers. She tried to sell the property to developers, but a lot of deals fell through. In the early 1990s, a few of the buildings were condemned and the motel finally closed. In the meantime, local residents established the Coral Court Preservation Society and got the motel listed on the National Register of Historic Places. But insufficient funds were raised to preserve the property, and the hotel was closed in 1993. It finally was demolished in 1995 for the construction of a housing development. Unbelievably, on the first day of demolition, the original sign was torn down and it was intentionally destroyed. Today, the Coral Court site has a subdivision of single-family homes. The only remnants are the original stone gates and pillars. But you can visit the National Museum of Transportation at 2933 Barrett Station Road in Kirkwood, Missouri, right nearby. They used salvaged materials from the demolition to build an original facade of one of the rooms with a replica of the Coral Court sign and a vintage Corvette in the driveway. Now, although the Coral Court's gone, a few neighboring motels from that era survived. The Duplex Tourist Cottages, which are now the Duplex Motel, and the Chippewa Tourist Cottages, now the Chippewa Motel, are still there. They were both there before the Coral Court. The Wayside Motel from the 1950s is still there. All three of these places are pretty clean and they offer a good Route 66 experience. While the Coral Court had a half-century run of squeaky spring fun as one of the best-known Route 66 motor courts, it also was part of one of the most horrific kidnappings of the 20th century. Stay tuned for that story in the next posting, The Coral Court Caper Part 2. See you then. Insane Sam out.